Hello and welcome to the Heritage Minute Special Podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Steve Simon, class of 1977. Today I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel Retired Tom Mabry, class of 1980. We'll discuss his USAFA and active duty careers and maybe get into some other topics as well. Tom, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Where are you from and what motivated you to attend the Air Force Academy?
So I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, and I'd always had a love for airplanes, always wanted to be a pilot. And some cadets came to my high school. I mean, I knew what the academy was, but not very much about it. But some cadets came to my high school through a grassroots program and told me more. And then I started looking into it. My liaison officer was fantastic, as were my school counselors. So I ended up applying to the academy. And at first I didn't think I got in, honestly, because some of the other nominees in my district had found out they'd been appointed and I had not. So I started planning to go to Purdue University in that fall. But then I got a telegram, from the academy in very late April offering me an appointment, and I accepted right away.
Okay, so not much time to be nervous before getting the appointment and showing up. Huh?
No, it all happened pretty fast, but I'm glad it did.
Yeah, me too. So, of course, you remember the class of 1980, which reported for in-processing 50 years ago. Hard to believe. So, any special recollections of that day or the ensuing basic cadet training?
So I had never been to Colorado, much less to the academy. So it was a little nerve-wracking when I got on the airplane to fly into the old Stapleton Airport up in Denver. But there was a hotel that a lot of appointees were staying in. And so that's where I stayed the night before. And then they put us on a bus and drove down to the academy. And there was a lot of conversation at first, but as we got closer to the gates, things kind of went silent a little bit. And of course, you always remember when the cadre gets on the bus for the very first time, they weren't smiling. But, they kind of told us what to expect. And then we got off the bus and went through, a gauntlet of other screaming upperclassmen. And I remember that day in bits and pieces. I mean, I remember sitting at attention for the very first time at Mitchell Hall having lunch. I remember standing in a lot of lines. I remember the haircut because, it was the 70s. A lot of people had long hair, and me included. So I remember that. Remember checking in or being, taken to my room in Vandenberg Hall. I was in Executioner's Squadron. So that day was pretty long and a little stressful, and I didn't sleep very much that night. But once you get to know your classmates and stuff, you kind of get into the rhythm of things, and BCT is definitely a grind. I remember Jacks Valley. That was the fun part. And I think like most cadets, I thought about quitting more than once, but the cadre and my AOC at the time said, hey, just give it time. And I'm really glad that I did. So
in processing, I remember two things. I remember shots and haircut. So
yeah, no, now that you remind me, I remember all the shots.
Yeah. And the shots, it wasn't like needles. It was like a little silver gun, as I recall. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well.
1980 was the first class to include female cadets, and obviously a co-educational USAFA is all that you knew. But any thoughts or reflections on being here for that historic time?
Well, yeah. I mean, things didn't always go smoothly. I mean, because, it was a very different experience, I think, for the academy and everybody that was here. I'm really glad that they've finally moved all of our female classmates into the squadrons. I think that happened in January. They were all housed together over in Vandenberg Hall at first. So it was really hard to get to know them. And I think it was really hard for classmates, but also the upperclassmen to get to know and help integrate everybody into the squadrons and things like that. So that really seemed to help in January once they were, we were all together by squadrons like we were supposed to be. I just know that I have tremendous respect and admiration for my female classmates because they handled some very difficult circumstances with a lot of maturity and grace at that time. But it got better over time, and I think it's been, brought real value added to the academy now that it's co-ed.
But yeah, to the academy's credit, I think none of the cadets liked the fact that the women were assigned to squadrons but were not physically present in the squadrons, and they jumped through a lot of hoops over holiday break to fix that when people came back in January. I think that definitely did help. So any other noteworthy memories from your cadet career?
Well, I mean, I think like everybody, you end up making friends for life, and you really understand that whatever you thought your limits were, they're not really your limits. So that was a very positive thing, I think. And I had a very positive academic experience. I had a lot of great faculty members, and that made learning, fun and interesting. And I think one of the highlights for me is I spent the summer at NASA Ames Research Center right before the start of my senior year doing as part of the summer research program, and worked with some folks at NASA that were trying to develop basically the first cockpit avoidance system, a cockpit collision avoidance system and things like that. So that was kind of cool to be working on that. A very small part, but it was neat to see how research happened and stuff like that. So that was great. And this may be a little weird, but my last AOC was actually a Marine Corps officer. And he was an incredible role model who led by example. He never raised his voice. He set really clear expectations and motivated every cadet to meet him. And we thought so much of him that we actually invited him to our first class reunion, and he came, which was kind of cool because he retired here in the Springs. His name was Major John Winslow. So he was just a really a great example of how to lead. And he and many others, kind of helped me for my own leadership style just by watching him and interacting with him. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, cool. And that's one of the reasons why the academies plural try to do some of the inner servicing. Obviously, the services are much more interconnected maybe than they were even back when we were cadets or early in our career.
Sure.
The joint world is so much more robust now than it was then.
Yeah, and had a lot of great examples of so that was really important, I think, and really glad I got to interact with so many different folks. It really helped in that regard, but he just kind of stood out over all the officers and other folks that we interacted with. That was pretty cool.
After graduation, what career field did you go into?
I wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't meet the medical qualifications during my graduation physical, so I ended up going into NAV training, but that turned out to be a really good experience. Ended up in KC-135s, first at K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Michigan, and then at Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. And that was back in the Cold War days, so I set a lot of SAC nuclear alert, supporting the B-52s that we were stationed with. But I did get to do a lot of TDYs, Alaska in the middle of winter. That was an experience. England and Saudi Arabia. And I really enjoyed being in KC-135s. You realize how important they are to the overall mission. And my last position before I got out of KC-135s and came to the academy was as a senior stand eval instructor nav at Pease Air Force Base. And one of the cool stories is my last KC-135 flight, my Finney flight, as a nav in KC-135s, my squadron mate and classmate Bill Lenhart actually was the pilot for that. So it kind of came full circle, which was kind of neat. Yeah. So
there's so many cool stories like that, and graduates in the real Air Force, as they say, that kind of connect.
Yeah, it was neat flying with someone that I had known for a very long time. So
I believe you came back to USAFIC in the mid '80s. Is that when you returned, or?
Yeah. I did 2 tours in tankers, and then I applied to become a military faculty member at the Air Force Academy, and I was actually accepted in that program. So first they sent me to get my master's degree at Purdue University, and then I reported to the Academy in January of 1988.
Okay. So you did make it to Purdue.
I did make it to Purdue.
Just not when you thought,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that was good because we were close to family and friends then too. We were going to graduate school, which was a real plus. And then came back here, taught in the behavioral sciences and leadership department. And I also was an attached flyer back in the day. The Colorado Air National Guard had two T-43, which were like military versions of 737s, but they had a dedicated mission here at the Air Force Academy where we did introduction to aviation courses for basically all freshman cadets. We taught them just enough to know about what to do when they were sitting at the nav training consoles, but then we took them to Air Force bases all over the country to kind of give them an introduction to the airport. And then there were some other upper class cadets that got more aviation and navigation and air skills training, and I did that as one of the navigators and in the back of the airplane. So
you got to stay in the air.
Stay in the air too, meet my gates, that kind of stuff. And it was nice to see cadets in a different setting outside the classroom too. But and I honestly thought that I was just going to do a 4-year tour here at the Air Force Academy and go back to flying. But the U.S. Army had supplied an exchange officer in the Behavioral Sciences Department that provided expertise in areas of biopsychology, sensation and perception, and learning and memory areas. But they ended that program. So unexpectedly to me, I got offered the opportunity to go back to graduate school and ended up getting a PhD from the University of Virginia in the psychobiology area, and then came back to the academy for another tour. So,
okay.
Yeah.
One door closes, another one opens.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes good things happen when you least expect it. So, and I'm glad it did.
And then, so then you stayed at the software the rest of your career? Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. I stayed in the department for several more years, but then I got an opportunity to move over to, everybody calls it the registrar's office, but its formal name is the Office of Student Academic Affairs and Academy Registrar. And I moved over there.
Which is why everybody says registrar.
The registrar, that's exactly right. You got that exactly right. But I moved there in January of 1988, and my primary responsibility was to help stand up what's now known as the Academic Success Center. There had been all of these support programs, but they were scattered through all of the academic departments, and those were all brought into a centralized location. And I helped with that. And then we also built several other programs to help cadets succeed. We restood up the Writing Center, and we created the Quantitative Reasoning Center, which was faculty level help at night in some of the science and first-year engineering courses here. So chemistry, biology, physics, engineering, mechanics. And also there was a reading program that was established. So it was a lot of things that a lot of other colleges and universities had, but the academy really didn't have in terms of academic support services and evening services. And ultimately, thousands of cadets have been going to those programs now. The center still exists. So I was really, really happy to be part of standing that up and helping it grow.
Well, that's great. I wasn't aware that you were one of the founders. So.
Yeah. It was it was a real opportunity, and I'm really happy that it happened. I think the cadets are better for it. The institution's better for it. And then in 2014, I actually was selected to become the Associate Dean for Student Academic Affairs and the Academy Registrar. So basically, I ended up leading the staff agency for the last 6 or 7 years that I was there. And then I retired.
Okay. So those programs, I know we always talk about small class size and the availability of the instructors for extra instruction is kind of the ways the academy helps students excel. But obviously, the things that you came up with or worked on and stood up kind of does that many, many times over.
I mean, it's just a supplement to that. It never replaced any of those other faculty members are here, and it's all about cadet success and learning. But a lot of our services were offered in the evening, and it was a central location, and so I think it really did help with cadet success.
So as the registrar, what were your, say, day-to-day, year-to-year duties?
We had a lot of different functions that we performed. Classroom registration and scheduling. We helped the dean manage the curriculum process. We have an information technology division. One of the things that happened once I joined the registrar's office is that we created an office for first year advising. It's still done by faculty, but we have a couple of folks that are dedicated to that, providing information and training to the faculty advisors for first year students until they declare their majors. I'm trying to think what else we did. Just a lot of different things, and we had a pretty big role in graduation as well. So,
I remember watching you many a graduation up on stage, reading names and shaking hands and doing all sorts of stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are involved in planning the entire graduation week. I mean, it's almost a year-round process. But as we get closer to graduation, planning and execution really ramps up, and our office had a big part of that. We'd make sure that we collected all the information and then presented basically the class to the Academy Board for certification and the designation of graduation honors. We'd help with the cadet briefings and with the march-on practice to make sure that they actually looked good when they came out onto the field, marched onto the field, and that took a lot of time and effort. CW and everybody was involved in that as well. And then my office had a pretty large role on day of executing the ceremony, including briefing the speakers and the Air Force senior leadership to make sure that they were ready for their role in the ceremony. And I did that several times.
Obviously, being on stage and briefing important people, Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary of Defense, Vice President, and presidents. So you got to work with several of each of those, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real honor to be able to do that, and I was very fortunate that I got to brief President Obama twice, then Vice President Biden once, and then my last graduation actually was briefing President Trump. So I never thought I'd meet a president, much less more than one. So it was kind of a unique aspect of the job that I'm very thankful for.
And have their attention that you're actually talking to them and they're listening to you. So
and they're
pretty heady.
Well, I mean, they're here for the cadets. I mean, it's a great honor to have them here, but every one of them was here for the cadets, and basically whatever we asked them to do, they did. But it was also nice to be able to interact with them like that and then be on stage for them and with them. But actually, the best part of the job, you mentioned that I got to call names. And the coolest part of that entire experience for me is, I'd look down the ramp to make sure that I was calling the right name. When they heard their name, you could just see this change in expression, this great joy as they started coming up the ramp to cross the stage to get their diploma, and then also, be congratulated. So that was a great experience to see that, for 7 years doing that. That was the best part of the job.
So how many hours did you spend on pronunciation of cadets before you went up there?
A lot. I mean, they're only going to hear their name once, and I wanted to make sure, along with the director of admissions, who was on the other side of the stage also calling names, we worked individually and together to make sure that we made the ceremony as seamless as possible, but got every cadet name right. And so that did take hours. I think my wife got really sick of hearing me practicing names at home for days beforehand, but I wanted to make sure I gave it my best shot. So,
any interesting presidential stories?
Yeah, I mean, President Obama had a really great sense of humor. He got asked, I can't remember who asked him. It wasn't me, but, because he had just arrived that morning. And so they asked him where he had been the night before, and he had given a speech in a town right next door to where I grew up. And so I just said, well, hey, I'm from there. And without missing a beat, he goes, well, everybody says hey. And I remember Vice President Biden, they had a really hard time getting him off the field. He greeted every graduate on stage, but then he actually went out onto the field and was walking through the graduates after the hats had been thrown up in the air. And I think they needed him to be someplace. So I'm glad I wasn't the Secret Service detail that day, but the cadets enjoyed it. And I'm sure he did too. So that was really neat to see.
In the 80s, when I was working in current ops, one of the majors in our office, one of his jobs was briefing the entire contingent. There was one time when he was kind of hear what to do, what not to do. He said, make sure you go to the bathroom before we go out on stage.
Yeah, hydration management, I believe it's called, Steve. I'm pretty sure that's the technical term.
Oh, okay. Well, we're talking with Lieutenant Colonel retired Tom Mabry, class of 80, and we're just about out of time. I'd like, in a moment, Tom, I'll ask for some final thoughts. But first, a word of thanks to our listeners and a reminder that Heritage Minutes and Heritage Minutes Specials are presentations of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network. New Heritage Minute products published every Sunday on our social channels and in audio and video. Heritage Minute specials like this one drop the third Sunday of every month. You can also find us on YouTube by searching Heritage Minutes, and you can watch or listen anytime at usafa.org/heritagehub. That's usafa.org/heritagehub. And don't forget, you can catch This Day in Air Force Academy History every day on KAFA, the Academy's radio station, 97.7 in Colorado Springs, or online at usafa.edu/radio. We're visiting with Colonel Tom Mabry, class of 80. So what are you up to now?
So I retired in 2020 after 29 years here at the Academy, both in uniform and then as a civilian. My wife and I both worked in education, so we were always tied to an academic calendar, but we're not anymore. So we've been doing a lot of traveling. We really enjoy doing that. I'm also a volunteer consultant for the National Academic Advising Association, and we've got a couple of grandkids that live close. So, life is pretty good, Steve.
It sounds like life is wonderful. So
Yeah,
and you mentioned travel, so I'll to let our listeners go that you and I were both in Prague last summer on the same tour, and we didn't know it till we got off the bus and looked at each other and said, I know you. So, any final words for our audience?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And, like I said, I mentioned that I was at the Academy for 29 years. The thing that kept me there is, the cadets are truly amazing young people. So I was really grateful to be part of that mission and, just to be part of a faculty and staff that really was there to develop officers of character and make sure they're ready to step out into the Air Force or the other services. So it was an honor to do that for as long as I did.
Well, good for you for all you've contributed to the Academy and the Air Force and the nation. That'll do it for this edition of the Heritage Minute Special. I'd like to thank you for attending.
Thanks.
Thank Ted for all the wonderful job he does behind the scenes, and obviously to our listeners. So thanks, and that's it.